Okay, I'll try it again. Good morning, and welcome to the sixth and final meeting of the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Growth and Infrastructure for the 2023-2024 interim. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Senator Buck,
Here.
Senator Daly,
Here.
Assemblyman Carter,
Present.
Assemblywoman Dickman,
Here.
Assemblywoman Gallant, Assemblywoman Gorelo,
Here.
Vice Chair Watts,
Here.
Chair Harris.
And I am here. We weren't able to actually hear Assemblywoman Gallant, but I want to make sure that we reflect that she is present. We have a quorum. I'd like to note that we have Assemblywoman Gorelo here for Assemblywoman Brown May today. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Before we begin with today's agenda items, which include our committee work session and presentations on sustainable transportation funding and DMV-related services, I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping items. First, I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting for the first time at our new facility in Las Vegas. Committee members, if you are attending virtually, go ahead and keep your video on if you can during the meetings to ensure we have a quorum. Be sure to mute your microphone when you're not speaking to minimize background noise. All presenters are asked to turn on their microphone before they begin their presentation. If committee members should have any questions during or after your presentation, please identify yourself each time you respond to a question. This assists our secretary in completing the minutes for the meeting. Where possible, materials for today's meeting are provided electronically. Anyone who'd like to access our meeting materials may find them on the committee's webpage or by contacting the research division. If anyone would like to receive notification of and access to the committee's agendas, minutes, and final report, you can do so by signing up at the Nevada Legislature's website. We will jump right into our first section of public comment. It'll be limited to 2 minutes per speaker. An additional opportunity to make public comment will be available at the end of the meeting. You can provide public comment here in Las Vegas or in Carson City or via telephone at the number that is posted on today's agenda. Is there anyone here who would like to provide public comment in Las Vegas?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Alexis Motorex with the Nevada Chapter AGC, representing the commercial construction industry in Northern Nevada. I'm here today on agenda item 5. While we're delighted to see this item on the agenda, the AGC has long advocated for sustainable and equitable highway funding. We've participated in every stakeholder group, Blue Ribbon Task Force, Advisory Working Group, and interim study on this issue for at least the last 2 decades. What is clear is that we need to do something to address the growing shortfall in the highway fund that has been created by inadequate gas tax that hasn't been adjusted since 1993. It's not indexed to inflation. We have increased fuel efficiency and a growing market share of hybrids and zero-emission vehicles. What else is clear is that there is no simple or easy solution and no magic bullet. Flat registration fees sound good, but are not equitable. Someone who drives 20,000 miles a year should not pay the same fee as someone who only drives 10,000 miles. Another option that has been discussed is charging per kilowatt hour. While more fair than a registration fee, the electric infrastructure does not exist to make that a viable option. Many believe a hybrid approach is a solution, a registration fee and a kilowatt hour fee on public charging stations to capture non-Nevada vehicles. This has challenges as well because there's the probability, especially as EVs become more prevalent, that Nevadans will actually be double taxed, once with the registration fee and again at any public charging station. Another item that's been talked about is a vehicle miles traveled or a road user charge. It seems to be the most equitable solution and remains effective regardless of the emerging transportation technologies. So it is not also without its own challenges, though. There's a collection and privacy issues that would need to be overcome, but those seem to be more manageable than others. So again, no easy solution to this, no magic bullet, but we do appreciate the conversation and are glad so many more people are beginning to take notice of this problem. We hope to continue the dialogue until a sustainable and equitable solution is found so that we don't make the mistake of a Band-Aid approach that doesn't truly solve the problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Harris and members of the committee. My name is Olivia Tanager. I'm the Executive Director of the Sierra Club's Toyabe chapter. The Sierra Club's Toyabe chapter is the largest grassroots environmental group in our great state. We'll be here today to answer any questions you might have on related to reporting on disconnections or agrivoltaics. Ultimately, we're asking for simple reporting on the number of energy disconnections. 25 states, as well as Washington, D.C., have an active formal reporting requirement designated either by state regulatory action or state legislative determination. Nevada does not currently report information on disconnections. So we're requesting legislation to direct the PUC to require energy providers to report power disconnections, household demographics that are properly anonymized, and location to the PUC. This will help service providers prevent disconnections, help people be more involved in the zip codes that are experiencing higher rates of disconnections, et cetera. We also strongly support agrivoltaic development in Nevada. You might not know this, but just this morning, the BLM released its Western Solar Plan that determines where solar can be appropriately sited in our state and across the Western U.S. We hope that agrivoltaics will become an important and increasingly large part of our renewable energy portfolio here in Nevada and support some of our rural farmers and people in the agriculture industry in the state. So with that being said, I'll be around for any questions, but we appreciate you taking up these issues and appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, members of the committee. Sheila Bray with the University of Nevada, Reno. I first want to take a moment to thank you for allowing us to present twice to you during this interim session, once on the hydrogen as energy, and then again on agrivoltaics. And here today, I'm here to support and provide our support for agrivoltaics, your number 6 request item today that you're going to be reviewing. We had a presentation during the interim on this, and it's especially, just as the previous speaker had mentioned, a critical piece for us to look at as we move forward in the state. So thank you, and we'll be here today as well for questions.
Okay, do we have anyone in Carson City who'd like to provide public comment today?
There's no one coming up, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Senator. BPS, is there anyone on the phone lines who'd like to provide public comment?
If you'd like to participate in public comment, please press star 9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. Caller, you're unmuted and you may proceed.
Great, thank you. Good morning. My name is Carrie Rohrmeyer. I'm the Climate and Energy Strategy Director for the Nature Conservancy, and we appreciate the opportunity for the Growth and Infrastructure Committee to be considering the request at the working session in preparation for the legislative session. In reviewing the recommendations today, we feel many align with our initiatives and programs taking place across Nevada. Specifically, the Nature Conservancy strongly supports B4, establishing provisions for the recycling clean energy products, B5, promoting climate resilient building benchmarks, B6, promoting demonstration of agrivoltaics, B7, requiring large-scale solar generation facilities to purchase from local utilities, and B10, requiring power service disconnection reporting on household demographics. Appreciate your time. The Nature Conservancy believes in keeping nature and communities at the center of our decarbonizing economy and knows that when we work together, we can achieve our state's clean energy goals without sacrificing the environment. I appreciate you hearing our comments today.
Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no more callers at this time.
Okay, thank you. As noted, we will have another round of public comment at the end of today's meeting. Committee members, I'd like to note that there are a number of electronic submittals under public comment today. and I'd like to acknowledge this now as well. Earlier in the interim, I requested that NV Energy come and speak to the committee about the proposal to increase the basic service charge in their Northern Territory. Unfortunately, they have declined the opportunity to come speak with us, and they have provided that in a letter. And I also have written a letter as the chair of the committee in response. Both their letter and my letter are available for the public to see under public comment. And I believe we might have a few other electronic public comments as well. So if folks would like to take a look at that, those are available for folks to look at. We'll go on to agenda item number 3, which is approval of the minutes for the meeting on May 29th and July 17th, 2024. The minutes for the meetings have been distributed to committee members for review. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Moved.
Got a motion from Vice Chair Watts. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Assemblyman Carter. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed, nay? Okay, the minutes for the meeting have been, turn myself off. The minutes for the meeting have been approved by the committee members present. The next item on the agenda today is the work session. Members have been provided with the work session document, which is also posted on the committee meeting webpage. The work session document contains a list of proposed recommendations for the committee to consider. And I'm going to turn it over to our policy analyst to provide an introduction. But before we do so, I just wanted to note that the committee will not be considering recommendation number 8 today. We have pulled recommendation number 8. And with that note, Ms. Rossiter, please proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Harris. For the record, Kristen Rossiter with the Research Division. As nonpartisan staff, we do not advocate in favor of or in opposition to any issue that comes before the committee. I'd like to provide just a brief introduction regarding the work session document that is before you. The chair and LCB staff of the committee have prepared this work session document to assist the committee in determining which legislative measures it will request for the 2025 session of the Nevada Legislature, as well as other actions the committee may endorse. The work session document contains a summary of recommendations presented during public hearings, through communication with individual committee members, or through correspondence submitted to the committee members and staff. The members of the committee do not necessarily support or oppose the recommendations in this document. Committee staff has compiled and organized the proposals so that committee members can review them and decide whether they want to accept, reject, modify, take no action on the recommendations. The work session document is grouped in the proposals by topic. They are not preferentially ordered. Pursuant to NRS 218D.160, the committee is limited to 10 legislative measures, which include both bill draft requests and requests for the drafting of resolutions. The committee may vote to send as many statements or letters of recommendation or support as it chooses, and include any statements in its final report. Additionally, subsection 5 of NRS 218E.560 requires that any recommendations for legislation proposed by the committee must be approved by a majority of the members of the Senate and a majority of the members of the Assembly appointed to the committee. Committee members are advised that LCB staff, at the direction of the chair, may coordinate with interested parties to obtain additional information for drafting purposes or for information to be included in the committee's final report. There is a summary of the recommendations in the work session document, and at the chair's direction, I can proceed with a quick summary of each, or if you have any further direction for the committee, I can conclude at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Rossiter. Before we do that, we'll just quickly ask members, are there any recommendations that we'd like to pull for separate consideration, aside from items 1 and 2. This is your chance to pipe up. Okay. Ms. Rossiter, please, if you could, just a brief summary of the recommendations we'll be considering today, and then we will take a motion.
Thank you, Chair Harris. For the record, Kristen Rossiter, and I will provide a very brief summary. There is further detail in the work session document following each of these recommendations. The first of which is under the category of traffic safety and infrastructure. Number 1, to request the drafting of a bill authorizing the usage of cameras to enforce school bus stop armed traffic violations. These are based on recommendations by Bus Patrol America. The second is the drafting of a bill on traffic safety infrastructure that creates safer streets for all users and focuses on high impact areas, as well as authorizes the installation and use of road safety camera systems based on recommendations submitted by the Nevada Advisory Committee on Traffic Safety and by the Fines and Fees Justice Center. The third is to request the drafting of a bill to improve traffic safety by revising provisions related to driving under the influence, submitted by the Nevada Committee on Traffic Safety, the Nevada Advisory Committee on Traffic Safety, excuse me. The next topic is related to energy. Number 4, request the drafting of a bill establishing provisions related to recycling clean energy products, specifically lithium batteries and photovoltaic solar panels. This was recommended by Vice Chair Watts. The next, item 5, is requesting of the drafting of a bill revising provisions related to Nevada's Green Energy Building Tax Abatement Program to promote climate resilient building construction renovation, decrease energy demand, and establish a voluntary benchmarking program for buildings, also recommended by Vice Chair Watts. Number 6 is to request the drafting of a bill to establish a definition of agrivoltaics projects and promote and support the development of agrivoltaics demonstration projects within the state, as well as to identify funding related to agrivoltaics projects based on 3 recommendations submitted by Vice Chair Watts, by the Sierra Club Toyobi chapter, and by the University of Nevada Extension. Number 7 is to request the drafting of a bill requiring large-scale solar generation facilities to purchase electric loads from local utilities in whose service territory the generator resides, recommended by the Valley Electric Association and by the Nevada Rural Electric Association. The next category under utilities is to request the drafting of a bill to revise provisions concerning natural gas infrastructure projects and contractor performance requirements. Again, this, as the Chair mentioned, is not under consideration. Moving on to number 9 is to request the drafting of a bill to revise provisions concerning motor vehicle fuels, recommended by the Nevada Petroleum Marketers and Convenience Store Association. And finally, number 10, request the drafting of a bill to direct the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada to require Nevada energy providers to report power disconnections, household demographics, and location to the PUCN, recommended by the Sierra Club Toyobi chapter. Thank you, Chair Harris.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to remind committee members that a vote on these recommendations today is simply a vote to approve the drafting of a bill draft request, not a vote in favor or against a legislative measure. Are there any questions or comments from the committee at this time? Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could you just repeat? So are we discussing 2 that you mentioned and just voting on the others as a block?
It is my intention, Assemblywoman Dickman, yes, to take one motion that would approve 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, and 10. And then we will do one motion separately to consider each 1 and 2. They will get their own vote.
So I'd like to be a no on some of these, but I should have spoken up, huh?
It is not too late. If you'd like me to pull any of those, I'm happy to do that and do individual votes on that as well. Not too late.
Oh, awesome, thanks. So could we do 5, 6, and 10?
Absolutely.
Thank you
Any
so
other?
much.
You're welcome. Any other items at this time? Okay, great. I will turn it over. I believe Vice Chair Watts has a motion.
Thank you, Chair. With that, I'd like to move to approve work session items 3, 4, 7, and 9.
Is there a second? Okay, we got a second from Assemblyman Carter. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay, motion passes unanimously. And we have approved recommendations 3, 4, 7, and 9. All right, we'll go back and now consider each of the individual items that we've pulled. Let's go ahead and turn our attention to recommendation number 1, which is the request.
I think you did have approved 3, 4, 5.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just make sure. We did
4, 7.
I thought
She pulled 5, 6.
Okay, we're good. We have approved items 3, 4, 7, and 9. Let's go ahead and turn to recommendation number 1, which is requesting the drafting of a bill authorizing the usage of cameras to enforce school bus stop arm traffic violations. Do we have a motion on this item?
Move to approve, Madam Chair.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
Second from Assemblywoman Gorlow. Any discussion on that motion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Any opposed? Nay. Okay, so that's Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, let's go ahead and move on to recommendation number 2. This is requesting the drafting of a bill on traffic safety infrastructure that creates safer streets for users and focuses on high impact areas, as well as authorizes the installation and use of road safety camera systems under certain conditions. Do we have a motion on item number 2?
Move to approve.
Is there a second? Got a second from Assemblywoman Gorlow. Any discussion on this motion?
Madam Chair.
Senator Daley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you may have guessed, not really a question, but a comment. Not really in favor of this particular proposal. I promised on the school bus one, which we just did, that I would keep an open mind. So I didn't vote against that one. If it's needed to get the bill to be a draft and we have a committee process to go forward and do all of that stuff, I can support it. Otherwise, I would oppose. But if you need to vote, we'll get it out of the committee today.
Very much appreciated, Senator Daley. Any other discussion on that motion?
Madam Chair.
Assemblywoman Gallant.
So I have some reservations about this BDR. However, I'm happy to pass it through committee and am looking forward to really diving into this during session. But at this point, I am going to vote yes, but with reservations.
Understood. Thank you. Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question. You referred to traffic cameras under certain conditions. What are those conditions? Do we know?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Dickman. This bill will be going through the legislative process, and so changes will likely be made. But it is my intention that there not simply be an authorization of safety cameras without any guardrails around that, whether that be time-wise, whether it be conditions on enforcement, on whether points are assessed. I want to ensure that these are used everywhere and not in a discriminatory fashion. And so there will be some conditions on how these are used.
Thanks. I still am a no on this, but I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Any other discussion on this motion? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed, nay?
Nay.
Okay, that's Assemblywoman Dickman. And maybe Senator Daley?
No, if you don't need me, so.
I don't think we do, Senator Daley. We'll let you be true. Okay. All right, that is 1 and 2. We will now move on to number 5. Recommendation number 5 is revising provisions related to Nevada's Green Building Tax Abatement Program to promote climate resilient building construction and renovation, decrease energy demand, and establish a voluntary benchmarking program for buildings. Do we have a motion on recommendation number 5?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Assemblyman Carter. Any discussion on this motion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, that is Assemblywoman Gallant, Assemblywoman Dickman, and Senator Buck. Motion passes. We'll now move on to recommendation number 6, which is the request the drafting of a bill to establish a definition of agrivoltaic projects and promote and support the development of agrivoltaic demonstration projects within the state, as well as to identify funding related to agrivoltaic projects. Is there a motion on number 6?
Move to approve.
And is there a second?
Second.
We got a motion from Assemblyman Watts, a second from Assemblyman Carter. Any discussion on this motion? Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just be curious if there are concerns that any of my colleagues have, if they could express those, since I haven't heard those previously on this item or the previous item.
Does anyone now have discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay?
Nay.
Nay.
All right, that is a no from Assemblywoman Gallant and Assemblywoman Dickman. Motion passes. And last but certainly not least, recommendation number 10, which is a request the drafting of a bill to direct the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada to require Nevada energy providers to report power disconnections, household demographics, and location to the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada. Is there a motion on recommendation number 10?
So moved.
We have a recommendation to approve, a motion to approve from Vice Chair Watts. Is there a second?
Second.
A second from Assemblyman Carter. Any discussion on this motion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, that is a nay from Assemblywoman Dickman and Assemblywoman Gallant. The motion passes. All right, committee members, thank you so much. That concludes our work session. We made it. Yay. Woo. Confetti. Okay. Before we close out the work session, I just want to quickly embarrass our policy analyst here, Ms. Rossiter. This is her last work session and she killed it, right? Yeah. Woo. She will be retiring, a well-earned retirement after dealing with me for the last legislative session and over the interim. If any of you have ever felt that a meeting has run smoothly or gone well, that is in 100% part to Ms. Rossiter and all the work that she does every day to make us all look good and to help us get policies passed. So thank you. We'll give a little round of applause, Ms. Rossiter. Thank you. All right. Okay. We've sufficiently embarrassed her. Let's go ahead and move on to agenda item number 5, which is presentations on sustainable highway funding, fuel tax indexing, and alternative state transportation user fees. There's going to be several presentations under this agenda item. The first one will be from the National Conference on State Legislatures. We have representatives of NCSL who are presenting virtually, I believe, Mr. Schinkel and Mr. Matt Wicks. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Hello. Go ahead and begin whenever you are ready. Yes,
all right, give us 1 second as we do all the clicking.
All right, take your time whenever you're ready.
Right. And I'm actually going to pass it to my colleague, Doug Schimpel, to start things off.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having us today. Nice to see you again, everyone. Thanks, Senator Harris, for having us. My name is Doug Schinkel. I am the Transportation Program Director at the National Conference of State Legislatures. And yeah, I appreciate to be the opportunity here today to give you a quick overview of what states are doing with regards to transportation funding. So let's go into our next slide. So this first slide is from the National Association of State Budget Officers, also known as NASBO. And as you can see from this slide, this kind of gives you the overall pie chart of how nationally, on average, states fund their transportation systems. You can see that the motor fuel tax makes up the largest chunk of that, although the other category is catching up on it quite quickly. And that has accelerated in the last decade. And you'll see that stat over there on the left that I think this is very important for this whole conversation in terms of context, is that motor fuel taxes comprised over 41% of state transportation revenue in 2016. You fast forward 7 years later, and that has gone down is now 3.5% less. And that's despite quite a few states raising their gas taxes or indexing their gas taxes during that time. So that tells you that the increased fuel efficiency of vehicles, as well as the increased adoption of electric and other alternative fuel vehicles, is negatively impacting the gas tax, which is once again the main source of transportation funding in most states. Although, as you can see from this pie chart, there's there's a lot of other ways to help fund a transportation system, but having that kind of linchpin of a user fee is very important. So this next slide here shows us just quickly state gas tax changes. So since 2013, 34 states and DC have increased their gas tax. Those gas tax increases have varied quite considerably, from a couple cents up to like 10 cents. And then it's worth noting that 24 states and DC have an indexed or variable rate gas tax, which means that their gas tax increases over time. It usually has a cap, but it's in some way indexed to either the consumer price index, population growth, or transportation construction costs. And it's worth mentioning that transportation construction materials and costs have gone up significantly, even higher than kind of regular inflation of late. So this is indexing is a strategy to kind of help keep pace with that, with costs, or try to keep pace without having to go back in to the legislature every year and raise your gas tax or something. So I just wanted to illustrate in this slide kind of how Nevada stacks up to some kind of neighboring sister states. Nevada a little bit more reliant on the gas tax than most states in general, and kind of around where a lot of your peer states are, although you'll see Arizona's is quite a bit quite a bit less. So I thought that was just kind of illustrative to point out there that Nevada is fairly reliant on the gas tax to pay for their transportation system. So probably one of the most common ways that states have been trying to tackle the increase of vehicles that either use less gas or use no gas is by the establishment of flat registration fees for special kind of vehicles. And the two types of categories of vehicles we're largely talking about are electric vehicles, which of course pay no gas tax. And so while there's not a lot of electric vehicles in the United States at this point in time, the expected adoption rate or, increased ownership rate of electric vehicles is projected to go up from around the 2%-ish that it's around now to much higher than that in the kind of decade ahead. So 39 states have electric vehicle annual registration fees. So you pay these fees on top of your traditional registration fee. So say here in Colorado, where we're based, pay $100 for my flat registration fee. Then I would pay another $50 for the EV fee. So I'd be paying $150 in total. And you can see these fees range quite considerably from $50 all the way up to $290 in New Jersey. A few years in the future, Washington also has a fee that's up in the $250, $260 range. And then you also critically, 22 states have plug-in hybrid fees. And those hybrid fees range from $50 to $150. Now, hybrid fees are important. Now, of course, hybrids still do use some gas, so they still are paying into the gas tax system. But their increased fuel efficiency means that they are typically not paying into the system to the degree to which they did in the past, or that they need to in order for the transportation funding pie to be kind of whole. So I do think that's an important distinction there. Most of these fees the revenue is dedicated to transportation infrastructure. There are a few states where some of the funding goes towards further electrification efforts as well, but I would say definitely the bulk of states use this just for traditional roads, bridges, tunnels, etc. And I wanted to note that 6 states have structured these additional registration fees to once again be indexed, so they grow over time. So you don't have to go back and keep on raising them. They just kind of go up a little bit by a little bit each year. So next we're going to talk about road usage charges, and I know that was kind of a big focus of why the committee wanted us to speak today. So I wanted to kind of quickly define what road usage charges means. So they're also known as mileage-based user fees or vehicle miles traveled. I'm going to refer them to road usage charges or RUC, and essentially it's a per mile charge. It's a roadway consumption tax that uses distance in miles as the measure of fuel. And in some ways, it's even better than a gas tax, because the gas tax was an incredible proxy for use. But as fuel efficiency or the lack of vehicles using fuel at all changes, that is not as good of a proxy for road use. And so with the mileage charge, one of the clear advantages of a mileage charge is that you're charging people based on their actual usage of the system, which is very much more akin to a utility, and which is a lot of transportation economists and a lot of transportation thinkers out there think is kind of the best way to approach things. You charge people based on their use of a system. You do that with water, you do that with electricity, and bringing some of that kind of same philosophy and principle to transportation, which kind of existed with the gas tax, but a little bit imperfectly. So there are 4 states out there that operate voluntary RUC programs currently. We're going to get into and talk about those a little bit. They're Oregon, Utah, Virginia, and Hawaii. So let's go to the next page. And I will note, though, that Hawaii's system does not start until 2025, and we'll go into a little bit of detail on that. So we have Oregon, Utah, and Virginia. All of these were created through the legislature. So they all have kind of legislative approval and buy-in, and basically they task the state DOT and sometimes other agencies like a state DMV or a fiscal or a revenue agency might have to be involved as well to come up with these programs. All these programs are voluntary right now. That means no driver has to be in a RUC program. It's important up front to mention that these programs are not even making money at this point. They're probably all money losers at this point in time perhaps with the exception of Virginia, I think actually might be making some money now. These programs are really more about proof of concept, meaning you get vehicles, drivers, and vehicle owners into these programs, and you help build scale, and you help understand what are some of the pros and cons with system kind of construction and operation and how those work. And you'll see that, you know, that the rates of miles are pretty similar in every state. And you'll see the number of enrollees is, you know, relatively low in Oregon, especially. Utah is at a decent place, and I think will increase quite a bit more with some of the, they've made some recent changes. And then Virginia's system is set up quite a bit differently, and we'll get into that a little bit. And that's part of the reason they have so many enrollees. And I do want to mention, once again, these are all voluntary, and the amount of RUC you pay is capped in all of these states, meaning in Hawaii, the electric vehicle registration fee is $50. You cannot pay more than $50 in a RUC in Hawaii when the program starts. And that's having to do with program construction. It's more about trying to get drivers in the program, work out the kinks, build scale by having more vehicles in the program, which increases your chances of bringing down collection costs and increasing the actual revenue you're bringing in. So it's important to make that distinction that they're all voluntary at this time, and they're all capped at the electric vehicle or other kind of hybrid vehicle fee you would have to pay in that state. So let's go into a little bit more detail about each of the states. And like I said, I'm going to address kind of Hawaii a little bit separately. So you'll see that the mix of eligible vehicles varies a lot by states. And this is like a real debate in the transportation world right now, because some states like Utah actually just went away and they eliminated hybrid vehicles from their program, and they just want to focus on electric vehicles. That makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways, because electric vehicles are clearly the kind of vehicle that pays nothing into the fuel tax system. And so this is an obvious group of vehicles to go after. The counterpoint would be that at the moment in the United States, it's actually highly fuel efficient vehicles that are really negatively impacting gas tax revenues from the states. So if you're not including that batch of vehicles, you need to think about another way to try and capture more revenue from those vehicles that are using the roadway but not paying in to the gas tax like they previously were. I would note here that Virginia's, like I'd said before, Virginia's program is quite a bit different. You'll notice that their eligible vehicles include any vehicle with a mileage per gallon of 25 miles per hour, 25 miles per gallon and above. So that means, and if you go back to this previous slide, you know, the number of enrollees in the program is significantly higher there, 28,000. And that's really the reason why. And so they have basically, if your vehicle gets over 25 miles per gallon, you have to pay a highway use fee, or you can enroll in their mileage choice program, which is essentially their RUC program. So because of this, they have a lot more vehicles in their program, which means they're more likely to start generating revenue soon. And it also means that they're just collecting revenue from this group of vehicles that is negatively impacting your gas tax revenue collection. I think another interesting thing to just note here is the collection methods, meaning how do you actually pay? So this is a big point of, you know, kind of contention. There's worries about privacy. There's good things that states are doing there with privacy. But I would say that there has been more of a trend towards looking towards in-vehicle telematics, using the actual existing technology that's out there. But Utah actually is going more towards odometer readings or odometer photos, which is a good, low-cost, simple way to report your mileage. And sometimes it's like you just take a picture from an app and then you send it through the RUC kind of system, and that kind of suffices. I think there are compliance questions there that will have to be worked out, but that's kind of that odometer reading perspective is kind of an interesting way to do things. And another thing I'd note from Oregon, something that might increase the number of enrollees they have, is that Oregon established through legislation that they have to work with auto dealers in the state to establish a way for point of sale enrollment in Oregon's RUC system. So then you don't have this disconnect where you have to go later and figure out. You actually have the option when you're buying the vehicle to enroll in the RUC program. So let's talk a little bit about the Hawaii program, because I know that was of particular interest to this committee. So Hawaii in 2023 established a RUC program for electric vehicles. The effective date of that is July 2025, as you can see on here. This is voluntary at the moment, and once again is capped at $50. So if you enroll in the RUC, you're never, at least in the short term, you're not going to pay more than that $50 you would pay in an electric vehicle registration fee. It's notable that Hawaii is going to transition to this becoming a mandatory program for electric vehicle owners starting in 2028. And that's that's important, because this will be the first time that a state has mandated that a certain group of vehicle owners has to participate in a RUC. Hawaii has a lot of advantages. Obviously, you don't have to worry about cross-state border traffic in Hawaii. So one of the questions that we often get, especially from eastern states, but this very much pertains to Nevada, where Las Vegas and Reno both border or are very close to nearby states, and there's a lot of cross-border traffic, is, well, what if I drive miles in another state? Well, right now, there's not too much you can do beyond that. I mean, there are GPS-enabled systems that will allow you, can kind of show where you drove out of state, but the programs aren't quite sophisticated enough to do that, although they have the technical abilities to do that. In Hawaii, that's not an issue. The other thing is that Hawaii is one of 14 states that has an annual vehicle safety inspection fee. Annual vehicle safety inspection, sorry. And so Hawaii and 13 other states require a vehicle owner to annually bring in their vehicle to have it inspected for safety purposes. And so they're just adding this odometer reading into that process. So they already have a process, and they're just adding one more item. We're going to look at your odometer and what it was last year, and then see what your odometer reading is this year, calculate how many miles you drove, do it by the mileage rate of 0.08 cents a mile, and then come up with your fee. And if it happens to go over that $50, you're just going to pay flat $50, because right now that's the maximum you can pay. So they have a really easy system to do this. So the revenue collected will be deposited in the state highway transportation funds. And critically, Hawaii's plan is that they will eventually have all the vehicles in the state enrolled, transition to a road usage charge system, not just the gas tax, not just the ICE vehicles, but all vehicles. And so lastly, I wanted to talk quickly about just federal, a lot of these efforts at the state level to create and run these programs, but also to run pilots, to do studies, to do public opinion surveys, have been informed and supported by federal funding. And so there's a new federal program via the IIJA that will continue that funding for states. And it's called the Strategic Innovation for Revenue Collection Program, SIRC. They issued a NOFO earlier this year, and that NOFO has closed. And my understanding from talking with FHWA this morning is that those grants will be awarded a little bit later this year. And then a little bit after that, probably later this calendar year, there will be a new NOFO for states. And state DOTs are oftentimes the entity that applies for these, to apply if the Nevada DOT wanted to apply for a pilot or to do a study or to do something with another state. Quite a few states have done things where they've looked at kind of cross-border traffic. That's the way you can get some seed money to do that. So I know I've maybe gone a little bit over time, and I want to keep things going. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. And I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Matt, to inform you about a few other user fee options states are investigating. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doug. And we'll go through this relatively quickly. So continuing our presentation about these funding policy options, first one I'll be talking about here are transportation network company fees. So what this is specifically these are fees applicable to on-demand app-based rideshare services, your Ubers and your Lyfts specifically. The policy rationale behind implementing this fee is that rideshare apps are very popular, and they can, in certain situations, in some areas, contribute to increased road usage and congestion as well. And the ultimate goal behind the policies are to ensure fairness and generate revenue as well. 13 states, in addition to Washington, D.C., currently have T&C fees. Their fee rates vary widely. Massachusetts, for example, implements it at 20 cents per ride specifically, where Georgia implements it at 50 cents per ride individually and 25% per shared ride. So, for example, two people are splitting an Uber, they would each be paid 25 cents split. So, and I do want to clarify one nuance too about this map really quickly is the states here in red are states with fees on T&Cs that we have listed dedicated to transportation. The clarification is that not 100% of those fees go only to transportation funding specifically. They get placed through a different variety of pots of money as well, but transportation is one element specifically. Moving to this next slide, we're going to talk about delivery fees. So this is just like it sounds. This is an additional fee applied to retail and food deliveries. During COVID-19, we saw the popularity of delivery fee services on retail and food increase quite a bit. And today it's still wildly popular. 2 states currently have these delivery fees implemented, Colorado and Minnesota. And there are a couple key differences between each of these 2 states. For example, Colorado applies their delivery fee to all transactions at the point of sale for both retail and food deliveries. Minnesota differs because Minnesota applies only to retail transactions, not food deliveries, but retail transactions specifically over $100. And they also include a list of exempted goods, baby products, medical services, etc. So in the first year of implementation, Colorado generated just under $76 million in operating this delivery fee. Minnesota has yet to implement it fully, but is estimated to generate about just under $60 million in their first year of operation. So this next one we're looking at here is kilowatt hour charges. And essentially what a kilowatt hour charge is the equivalent of a gas tax, being only applied to public electrical charging stations specifically. 8 states currently implement a per kilowatt hour fee. And it's important to note again that this is only for public charging stations, not private or at home charging stations. But there is an interesting case study from Pennsylvania. Originally, Pennsylvania's legislation applied to private chargers and at home chargers. However, this past year, they recently amended their law to remove that part, specifically due to administrative costs and enforcement issues of enacting this charge on private chargers as well. In 2023, Pennsylvania did raise about $1 million from the kilowatt hour charge. And on average, across all the 8 states that have this fee implemented, the fee is on average about 3 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, most revenue from this kilowatt hour charge does go to state road projects, and the policy rationale behind the per kilowatt hour charge is twofold. The first is that for electric vehicle drivers, this is already a system pretty similar. Just like you'd go with a gas vehicle, pay at the pump your tax. If you go and charge your vehicle, you're paying for the kilowatt hour fee. So it's a simple translation. It's understood by electrical vehicle drivers. The other rationale is that this can also help recoup money from out-of-state electrical vehicle drivers, which is a very important states that have high tourism and motorists driving through, and of particular importance for states on the East Coast where states are a bit closer and clustered together. So we went really quickly through a variety of different funding mechanisms, but NCSL has a variety of sources to help everyone keep track of these options, from toolkits, databases, reports, primers, etc. And I will say a particular note, NCSL, we do have the Alternative Transportation User Fees Foundation partnership, where we gather lawmakers from across the country to talk through these issues and learn from each other as well. So I went through that again really quick, but if you have questions, feel free to ask. If we don't have time for questions, there's at the end of this presentation, feel free to contact my colleague, Doug Schinkel, and I as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That was comprehensive, which is why we like to have you all here. Very informative. I appreciate it. Do any of the committee members have questions? Okay,
Madam
we
Chair.
will start with, all right, we'll start with Assemblywoman Gallant.
Okay, so if it's okay, I have a few questions. So
Absolutely.
on that, thank you. So on the slide, can you pull up the slide where you were talking about the per charge per mile?
Absolutely. Pull it up really quickly.
The kilowatt charge or the electric vehicle charging or the road usage charging?
The
Per
road
mile.
usage charging. Yeah, the per mile.
Yeah, okay, give us a second to get back there.
Sorry, thank you. I appreciate that. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. So I do want to preface, like, we need to do something about the electrical vehicles. And I have an electric vehicle, so I would be imposing this fee or tax on myself. So, but I do think we need something. However, when I was taking a look at what the states were doing at like $1 per mile, I mean, on average, you look at the fact that, and I know you said they're capped, but you know, Nevada in particular, we don't have a state income tax. And so if we can tax something more, then we have a tendency to do that over time. And so when I'm looking at like 1 cent per mile, I mean, and you're looking at, or you're looking at $1 per mile, and somebody then would drive about 1,500 or 15,000 miles per year, you could be looking at potentially over time charging these EV drivers $15,000 a year for driving on these roads, which is probably way, yes.
Assemblywoman Blunt, it's 1 cent.
Is it 1
per mile.
cent?
1
It's
cent.
1 cent.
Okay.
So it's Assemblywoman Gallant, if I may,
Thank you. I'm so sorry. I almost freaked out.
Yeah, that's an important distinction because that would blow up everything related with this if it was that much. So these charges are only 1 or 2 cents per mile, and it's very, very important to communicate that these rates are chosen and calculated in order to, as much as possible, mimic what a average driver around 12,000 miles per year in a state would pay in gas tax. So these, now that could change, and you could use these to help for congestion purposes or to advantage vehicles that are more clean, that are, emit less pollution. But really at the moment, these programs are constructed to almost just kind of mimic what someone would pay in the gas tax. So the total amount of money would be very similar. And maybe to get to something that you might be interested about when you're talking about this is that most of the studies have shown that most user groups would pay a very similar amount in a RUC as they would in a gas tax. And some people sometimes think that a rural driver might be more disadvantaged by a RUC because they may have to drive more because they're in a more rural area, so they just have to drive more miles, right? But the flip side of that from the studies we've seen is that most rural drivers are more likely to own less fuel efficient vehicles and older vehicles. So they actually would, in many instances, not going to apply to every single individual, right? But kind of as a whole, rural drivers would actually pay a little bit less. And urban drivers would probably pay a little bit more, but we're talking about like 2-4, like it's pretty similar. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of give that context there.
Can I just make a suggestion? Like I see, when we're looking at Oregon and Virginia, it's very clear that's 1 cent. But when you look at the Utah, like for somebody, I would see 1 cent as being like 0.016, not 1.06.
We will make that
$1.06. In like any other world, right? Okay, so I appreciate that. And then I was just looking, on the record, looking at calculation, this particular month for my electric vehicle, I did 391.53 kilowatts, and we're almost at the end of the month. So I could be looking at $11.70 if we're looking at 3 cents per kilowatt, which then translates to like $140 a year. So I think that is reasonable when we look at something like that. However, how are you going to do that on somebody that charges from their home versus somebody that's charging at a station?
Our charges the moment, so none of them apply to charging at private residences. So that is intentional in that it would be administratively and technically much more difficult to collect those charges from home. It is not impossible. There is the technology that exists, but there would need to be probably more advances in getting the right kind of technology in every home. And so this is if you're thinking of the pros and cons of the kilowatt hour charge, Assemblywoman, that is clearly one of the main, and we're not, and NCSL is here, be very clear, we're not here to advocate for anything, we're to give you options. This is clearly a con of this system, is that there is an equity issue, and that the people, electric vehicle owners tend to be more affluent, not always, but they tend to be, and then they tend to charge at home. So then you're really it's not equitable to the people who do then have to charge at a public charging station because they live in an apartment or they don't have a garage or what have you. Another dynamic to think about with regards to these kilowatt hour charges is a lot of what I've heard from lawmakers is the rationale for this is to make sure that you are capturing revenue from out-of-state drivers who are driving through your state who previously would have probably gassed up at some point and contributed a little gas tax to your state. Now, if they're driving their electric vehicle, they're using your roadway and they're potentially not paying a cent into your system, even though they've used your system maybe perhaps quite extensively if they're taking I-80 across the state or what have you. So these are a way to make sure that kind of out-of-state drivers, electric vehicle drivers, are paying into the system. So that's another kind of wrinkle that I always think is worth mentioning.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And thank you for clarifying on the gas. Oh, sorry, my dogs are going to start barking. Thank you for clarifying on the per mileage. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman.
Assemblywoman Gallant, is that the conclusion of your questions? Okay, we'll go to Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm just, this is not to do with electric vehicles, but for a miles travel charge, I think it's a big deal that there doesn't seem to be a way to discern when people traveled out of state. But there's a lot of people who travel to California for work. Or if you go on a cross-country trip, you're paying gas taxes when you buy gas in those states, but then you're still going to be paying the miles traveled in Nevada when you weren't actually there. Is anyone working on figuring out a way to determine where those miles were traveled?
Absolutely. That's a very important question, Assemblywoman Dickman, and something that we often get questions about. So yeah, I didn't mean to suggest that there is not kind of investigation and research and that going on right now. So let me give you a quick picture of what that looks like. So several states, especially Oregon, Washington, and California, have been doing a lot of research and have actually operated small scale pilots where they use kind of fake money, but to kind of establish that you could have a clearinghouse. And the one in Oregon, I believe, is based out of the Oregon DOT. And you do have to have a GPS enabled tracking system, right? So that's one of the trade-offs I always say there's a trade-off between payment and privacy. Say, well, I don't want a GPS enabled payment option. Because I have concerns about the privacy. Now, the data is deaggregated, anonymized, and it's there's a lot of protections in place, but people still have legitimate concerns about that, and that's understandable. And I think it's the role of, state legislatures and government to kind of come up with the systems that do address that. But if you have a GPS-enabled system, you then can tell where you were, and you can be, if you have an Oregon system, be like, well, you drove into California or Idaho, and we're not going to charge you for those miles. None of the programs are doing that yet. Those 4 programs, the 3 that are in operation, and of course, Hawaii, it doesn't really pertain because they don't have this issue. But they do have the technical capability to do that, but they're not doing that quite yet because these systems are more focused on creating the scale and the systems within one state. And then I think the next phase will be determining more how you make this work on a regional level and have some sort of regional clearinghouse. So obviously these issues are much more paramount on the East Coast. And so Eastern states are very, very, this is one of the reasons that this RUC debate and the legislative activity has mostly been more in Western states, because folks in Western states, there are states like there is cross-border traffic, of course, but it's less so than in eastern states. So there are things to do. There's a group called the Eastern Transportation Coalition that is doing a lot of work and research on this on the East Coast and the East Corridor. Because you think of a state like Virginia, Virginia, Maryland, DC, Delaware, constantly cycling and moving into different states. So that's really essential. I would say that the phasing in states are trying to get their own programs in place, work out the kinks, but simultaneously, when I showed that map of the federal funding that's been given to states, a lot of that has been given to do studies and specific pilots that kind of mimic what a clearinghouse or regional system would look like. And the last point I would make on this, so to say states are working on this, it's technically possible, Assemblywoman. You just have to have a GPS-enabled system. And then you have to have a clearinghouse. If you say started having a ruck on a regional level, then you would have to have some sort of system that would say, okay, you drove these miles in this state, so that revenue actually goes to, California or Oregon rather than Nevada. The last point to make is that the bipartisan infrastructure law, the IIJA, created a national advisory board and mandated the creation of a national ruck pilot, because the position of NCSL has been that this conversation is better driven by the states, because if we get the federal government involved too early, that may lead to more consternation and more political pushback for some good reasons. So let's let the states experiment with these systems, see what works, what doesn't work. But the next step is that there's a national pilot that's supposed to be established. It's a couple of years behind, still hasn't been established, but what we're hearing is it seems like it's getting closer to reality. That would be ran kind of more and, have participants from all 50 states, and would once again kind of try and mimic, might not actually be using real money, but would just be people volunteering to participate in such a system and start to learn about, if we have cross-border traffic and we have a system that is GPS enabled and can understand where a car is any point in time, how do you track that? And then how do you report out and collect the money out to the different entities, to the different states, depending on how many miles were driven in every state? So I would say that's going to be a big point of emphasis in the next 2 to 5 to 10 years, is moving beyond having it state-based, because we can do this at the state level and the technology and the systems kind of exist. They need to be scaled up and there's kinks to be worked out, but that can be done. And these states are already kind of proving it, but doing this cross-border piece is it's trickier. It's technically possible, but it does require, I think, really the clearinghouse, regional or national level, and figuring out what entity, if this ever did become national, what entity would actually be appropriate to collect such a national road charge. So I hope that somewhat answers what you were asking, Assemblywoman.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I just think it's really important to get that figured out. But thank you so much. And thanks for being here. And thank you, Chair.
Okay, Senator Buck.
Thank you so much, Chair Harris. I didn't see where there's potentially a flat amount. I think that it's very important that we are very thoughtful with the cost of the infrastructure of a lot of these other states, the personnel, the technology that you need to track all of that. Maybe not offset the cost that or the actual benefit of what you get from it. So a flat amount, does any state do just a flat amount, and then that goes into the transportation fund?
For a road usage charge specifically? No, because the intent and purpose of the road usage charge is to kind of create that system of a per mile charge to be a proxy for a gas tax. So I think if you're thinking about a flat amount, probably the most logical option is something like an electric vehicle or hybrid or even highly fuel efficient vehicle fee. And you can charge that. And the advantage is, once again, talking about pros and cons, the pros of a vehicle registration fee and an additional vehicle registration fee is it's very easy to add that on top of and collect. There's hardly any new collection costs. Your state DMV or Department of Revenue is already doing that. And so that probably, if you want to have like kind of a flat amount, and you know there's a certain class or type of vehicle that you believe in or know in your state through research is not paying kind of its full share, that is probably the most logical way to go about kind of a flat amount. And once again, those fees range from $50 to $290. They typically have applied to just hybrid fees, hybrid vehicles and electric vehicles, and a few other alternative fuel vehicles.
And I'll mention too, just really quick, that in the case of Virginia, the RUC is an alternative to their highway usage fee, which is paid for at the point of registration for fuel efficient vehicles. And they actually cap what you would pay annually in a road usage charge per year. I apologize, I forget the exact number for the Virginia highway usage fee, but the RUC fee per year, you can't pay more than that maximum amount. It's a hard stop at that point. So it's not a flat fee, but it does get capped, so you can't bump up over that number significantly.
So are these other states that are implementing all of these intensive, like look at every little mile that they go out of state, are they looking at how much that's going to cost for personnel, for technology to do that? 'Cause I would think that that would be a great amount.
Yeah, and so to be clear, none of the states currently, the operational RUC programs in these 3 states and soon to be 4 in Hawaii, none of them are they're doing studies about the out-of-state travel. But if you sign up for the RUC program and you drive out of state, those miles are going to be included at this time. However, the important caveat that kind of makes the driver, the constituent, feel better is that all these are capped at a certain amount. So you're really not, at this point in time, that's not really a big concern for drivers. If you were to change that cap, then I think you would start to have more concern about the out-of-state miles driven. And then, yeah, it sounds like essentially you're asking the question about like, how much is this going to cost to collect and administer? This is the clear big hurdle. The big thing to be figured out with a RUC is that oftentimes tax economists say that the gas tax is the perfect tax or one of the best taxes that's ever existed. It's incredibly easy and cheap to administer and collect. Gas tax collection costs are, and we have 100 years of history to look at this, right? Are typically estimated to be about 1 to 3% collection costs to administer a gas tax system. Frankly, I'm not sure that we would ever quite get that low with a RUC. But I do think with the more technology that you use, that introduces more accuracy and that you can probably eventually get to that point. But this all requires scale. When you have these programs that have hundreds and low thousands amount of vehicles, you have to get that scale up higher. And then the collection costs are going to go down. And then there just has to be a lot of kinks worked out. That's why Utah already made, some revisions. They removed hybrid vehicles from the program. They got rid of a couple payment options that they felt were too expensive to administer and not bringing in enough money. And so I think simplifying these systems as much as possible makes a lot of sense, but that's going to be, once again, along with the out-of-state travel, the cross-state border traffic, the figuring out the best way, what is the best program design. And that's really why these programs exist. They're operational programs, but there really are kind of pilot programs in a way, in that they're meant to help increase our collective understanding and learning of how these systems work. But getting these collection costs down is going to be a multi-year effort. But I do think simplifying the system, thinking about who in your state, is this something that it makes most sense for the state DMV to administer, or a Department of Revenue, or the two in combination? You got to think about what agencies might make the most sense or the most well-equipped to do this. But that's going to be one of the burning questions in the year ahead, is how you get these so that they're not overly costly to administer.
All right, committee members, any additional questions? Not seeing any. Thank you both so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank
We
you,
will go ahead and
Chairwoman
close out.
Harris.
All right, have a great day. We'll
Thank
go ahead
you.
and close out agenda item number 5. Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. We'll just move on to our next presentation under agenda item number 5. And that is a presentation from the Nevada Department of Transportation. We have the Deputy Director of Planning and Administration, Ms. Sandra Rosenberg, with us.
Thanks. Thank you. Good morning, Chairwoman and members of the committee. As mentioned, my name is Sandra Rosenberg, Deputy Director of Planning and Administration for the Nevada Department of Transportation. Director Larkin Thomason sends her regards. Unfortunately, she had a conflict today, but I'm happy to speak on this incredibly important topic. And I really want to thank NCSL for a really important presentation as well. It's going to shorten my presentation also because we were covering some of the same things in terms of examples from other states. I do have with me today Jeff Doyle from CDM Smith, which is a consulting firm that has been assisting with us for the last few years on some of the analysis on different options for sustainable transportation, as well as being very knowledgeable and helping us stay in the loop on what's happening in those other states, as you heard about today. So a little bit of background, and I know you all know this, but Nevada is one of the fastest growing states in the country, outpacing the national rate of population increase by more than double. So more people using the transportation system. In addition, not only are we growing as a population, but the vehicle miles traveled per person is increasing as well. So the VMT is outpacing the population growth. So that's critically important too, which puts a higher demand on our roadway system. A little bit about the State Highway Fund, and I know we went back and forth on a number of different presentations on this, and in the session we'll get into much more details on all of this, but finding a way to showcase the streams of revenue that go into the State Highway Fund. A big part of it is fuel taxes, other motor vehicle fees and taxes, registration, licenses, things like that. Federal aid reimbursement is obviously a big portion on that, and then there's other miscellaneous revenue. Most of that is really going with our partner agencies at DMV and DPS, and I think that's important to note that we're not the only agency that utilizes the State Highway Fund, although NDOT does utilize approximately 80% of that. I do want to note the fuel tax does include the fuel revenue indexing from Clark County as well as part of a state revenue. This one is both my favorite and least favorite slide in the presentation, but I think it really showcases the issue at hand here, or at least part of the issue at hand here. This is an index. The National Highway Construction Cost Index is the line versus the Highway State Revenue Growth. They were both indexed back to 2003. So as you can see, the growth of costs has outpaced our revenue for quite some time. However, in the past couple of years.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to pause you just for a second. We can't see your slides.
Oh, no.
And so I'm going to ask BPS to see if they can jump in and help us out here so we can follow along.
Okay.
I think someone's coming to save us.
One moment, Chair.
Thank you. For committee members, the presentation is also available online. I don't want to hold us up too much longer. So, Ms. Rosenberg, you can go ahead and continue. Members, if you can, jump online to the committee website. And there you should be able to follow along with her presentation until we can get it up. Ms. Rosenberg, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so we were talking a little bit about the construction cost index, and I wasn't going to say all the numbers, but in case you can't see it, so the construction costs have skyrocketed by 64% in the last 2 years, essentially. So that's an incredible increase, which is really hampering our ability to deliver the program as previously. Let's see here. And then just a note, in terms of fuel taxes, obviously I noted there's a number of different revenue sources that do enter into the State Highway Fund, but one of the biggest ones obviously is the fuel taxes. And it's not just the state that's highly reliant on that, but local agencies as well. There are, county fuel taxes, and at the federal, state, and local level, this is an issue in terms of the revenue not keeping up with the demands on the system. Yeah, so as you can see, the federal gas tax revenue has been declining over the past 10 years. When there are shortfalls in the Highway Trust Fund, which is pretty common now, the federal government transfers general fund tax revenue, often derived from bond sales or other sources. So as I mentioned, this is an issue at all levels of government. That continued influx of general fund money at the federal level may not be sustainable either, which is why, as NCSL mentioned, there are conversations about a national pilot as well. And as VMT continues to increase federally, though not anywhere near the pace of Nevada, that leads to a declining revenue, particularly per mile. The revenue is declining overall, even with an increase in miles driven due to increasing fuel economy of just the average fleet vehicle, not just EVs, but overall fuel economy increasing. So at the state level, again, the gas tax revenue per mile is continuing to decline. So our overall revenue has been relatively flat over the last few years because of that VMT increase is right now making up for the loss in per mile revenue. That is unlikely to continue as we continue to see the per mile amount go down. And just as an example, in 2012, we collected about 0.83 cents per mile driven on our roadways. And today it's about 0.74 cents per mile. The state gas tax has not been increased since the early 90s, so you can imagine what it was back then versus today, and it's continuing to go down. And we expect that decline to accelerate as vehicles continue to be more fuel efficient, and the influx of alternative fuel vehicles continue to enter the market. So Nevada's not alone, as you heard previously, in having to address this problem. All of the states plus the federal government are now actively researching, testing, or implementing alternative funding options. And for the main options that states have taken include general fund revenue transfers, special registration fees for EVs and hybrids, taxes on electricity, used to charge EVs, and per mile road usage charges. Again, you heard about that a little bit. 38 states now really, just on the general fund side, 38 states now receive some form of general fund revenue. On average, it's relatively small, about 5.8%, but that doesn't tell the whole story because there's a wide range of what that looks like from state to state. For example, on the left, those states receive the highest percentage of their transportation budget from general fund revenue. And then on the right, those are the ones that, from a dollar perspective, receive the most. And that is typically as like a program allocation versus an annual budgetary transfer, if you will. There was one example in 2007 in Nevada where the legislature made a one-time transfer of $154 million to help fund I-15 improvements. Unfortunately, the very next year, when the state faced the Great Recession, that general fund transferred back $120 million of that to help other state programs. I believe that this was largely covered in the prior presentation, so I don't want to go into too much detail, but I will add, we've done some calculations on what does the average driver pay in Nevada if this state were to consider a flat fee, and it would be somewhere on the order of $166 per year. That's what the average Nevada driver pays in state and federal fuel taxes. That does not factor in the county level taxes because they do vary so much from county to county. I believe this was also covered in the prior presentation, so skip over that. And I think this was also covered, so thank you again, NCSL. Let's move right along. And I know they did talk quite a bit about Utah, but I think some additional information in terms of, I think this graph is very telling. It's not, it's not that different from ours, other than Utah has been generating additional types of revenue. So on the left is a graph from UDOT showing the same general decline in gas tax per mile and how much UDOT is spending on their transportation system per mile. So the expenditures are outpacing, again, the revenue generated. That's that gap between. Utah may be the only state so far that has developed a holistic strategy for meeting and funding their transportation needs. On the right, to address the decline in the gas tax, they have enacted all 4 of the transportation revenue options we discussed. Targeted general fund transfer, EV and hybrid registration fees, kilowatt hour tax on public charging stations, and a road usage charge in the near term as an option for EVs, but in the longer term as a future replacement of the gas tax. To address the increasing cost of construction, they have indexed their gas tax, the EV fees, and the RUC to the consumer price index. Their strategy is to use the gas tax for ongoing maintenance and preservation of their existing system, while new capacity improvements and multimodal projects are funded by general funds, including an up to $2 billion in bonds for highway expansion. Utah also uses some general funds to support transit as well. In 2021, AB 413, you all may remember this, AB 413 directed NDOT to establish an advisory working group to study the funding needs and recommended revenue options. We did present this last session, but we wanted to remind you all, and we have provided a link to that full report as well. There is a executive summary towards the beginning which summarizes the recommendations, but the report itself goes through all of the various different revenue options that were evaluated and how we came up to these recommendations. And I do want to note for the record that this advisory working group was made up of high 20s, I believe it was 29 members. And while NDOT did staff and support facilitate these meetings, we were one vote of those 29. So these aren't necessarily NDOT recommendations, but rather this multidisciplinary advisory working group, which was made up of state and local agencies, transportation and construction industry, energy and environmental sectors, labor, and more. So yes, if you haven't read the report or at least skimmed the recommendations, I highly encourage that. Those recommendations include in the near term, really to address the immediate backlog of projects while we're developing longer term funding mechanisms, is to institute a special registration fee on plug-in electric, plug-in hybrid, and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, and provide a mileage-based user fee as an option, a RUC as an option. Drivers can choose which one to opt into. Increase the state fuel taxes, both gas and diesel. Index the state fuel in those counties that are not already indexed, so outside of Clark and Washoe. And while that option doesn't generate a huge amount of revenue compared to the overall backlog, in the interest of, essentially fairness and as we discuss other options, having it start sort of at the same point at the different counties would be helpful. Enable county commissions to index the county's portion of the fuel tax, increase vehicle registration fees to provide a modest revenue for highway purpose, and direct 100% of the state portion of the GST to the State Highway Fund. Longer term, replace the fuel tax with a per mile RUC on all vehicles by 2035. Obviously, that year can be adjusted. That was based on certain federal regulations for electrification of the fleet. Begin a long transition away from the fuel tax now by testing different approaches to RUC with electric drive vehicles. So that's in line with what NCSL was talking about in terms of these pilots or early implementation programs to really test out the options while also collecting some revenue from the users that don't currently pay a fuel tax. We get often asked about what is that, what is the shortfall or backlog? And I will be honest with you, it is changing almost daily as we get bids in that continue to increase in cost. But our most recent analysis from probably 6 or 8 months ago show that just to preserve the statewide system, we anticipate needing about $3 billion over the next 10 years or $300 million per year. That is sort of our target for spending on preservation. I will say that is to essentially maintain the system in its current condition and minimal improvements on the condition of our roadways. To greatly improve the condition would obviously require additional investments. And then our needed capacity improvements are estimated at about $17.6 billion over that same time period. And that is projects we know about, projects that we may be working on or have been requested. So we have a listing of those capacity enhancement. What this doesn't include, and we're currently doing some additional analysis on that, is the continually increasing cost also of just running the agency, the administration, facility needs. There are certain things that used to be kind of minor costs that are greatly growing rapidly, such as things like litter removal, homeless encampments, copper theft, all of those things that used to be kind of incidental are now becoming programs of their own as well. So not at the level of some of these other, preservation and capacity, but increasing at a non-insignificant amount, again, to keep the programs running. So as the fuel tax has been the historical funding sources for all of this, or most of this, the erosion will continue. And we are currently we hope to continue to work with the legislature as well as the governor on how we address this challenge. I do want to note, I do work for NDOT. I am an executive branch employee, so I am not here similar to NCSL, I'm not here to make any specific recommendations, but we are here to continue to do the analysis, and we hope to continue to work with all of you if you have any questions as we move forward, and to again continue to provide the data and the analysis as we continue these conversations. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, committee members, any questions? All right, I will start with Senator Daley first, and then Vice Chair Watts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And quick question, just a refresher for me, make sure I have it correct. So on the gas tax now for the fuel, there's a federal portion which goes to the feds, and Nevada does pretty well on getting the match back on that, 90+% from what I understand, if that's not correct. So then there's the state portion, and that goes into the highway fund, and 80% is used by DOT, right? There is no, and then there's a county portion. Each county has their own deal, and each county has set that individually, or?
There's a portion of it, and there may be someone here who knows better than me. There's a portion of it that's mandated. There's a portion of it that is optional and up to the county commissions.
Okay, so each county has at least a minimum that's been set by the state. And then I know Washoe, back in I think 2005, it's been quite a while, did indexing based on construction inflation with the cap. So if construction inflation was 10%, I think the cap was 2 or 2.25, I can't remember, but that's been going forward. And then Clark County recently put in their indexing And if I heard you correctly, you said the state gets a portion of their county tax, because I know that doesn't happen in Washoe. At least I don't believe it does. The state gets a portion of their indexing?
Yeah, for the record, Sandra Rosenberg, NDOT Deputy Director. That is correct, and the way that works in Clark County is they index all of those levels. So they index the total fuel tax, so that includes the federal, state, and county. And the state receives the index on the state portion of that.
And that's the part I needed a refresher to understand. So they index the portion of the federal tax as well? Who received that?
That goes to Clark County, RTC of Southern Nevada.
So even though they're indexing somebody else's portion, they're benefiting from the money, which is perfectly fine with me. Has there been any talk about indexing the state portion statewide, at least the state portion? I think the counties should all be mandated to index it as well and figure out the formula on how it stays in the county or not. I know RTC in Washoe County has agreements where they work with DOT and joint fund projects. They also work with the local governments. My understanding, and tell me if I'm wrong, in Clark County, it's collected by the RTC, but then portioned out. They don't actually bill anything. It's portioned out to the local governments and to the state. And I agree. The road use charge is the most equitable way. If you can get past some of the privacy stuff, then I wouldn't have to, pay fuel tax on my lawnmower anymore. And yes, I still use a gas-powered lawnmower, if anybody's wondering. But until we get there, if it's a flat fee, if whatever it is, there has to be. We can't let the perfect get in the way of the good. We have to move forward with something that works at least as a gap until we can figure out all the rest of the stuff. So the question, any idea on or anybody suggesting that we can do an indexing on the state portion of the tax?
So again, Sandra Rosenberg, NDOT Deputy Director. So I went back to, those of you who can see the slides, back to slide number 15, where it has a summary of the recommendations from the Advisory Working Group Sustainable Transportation Funding Study. And that is the indexing on the state fuel tax is a recommendation. So, that would be up to the legislature to decide. There are some reasons for that. I think we have some calculations. I don't have it in front of me today in terms of the revenue that would generate. It's not a huge amount, but at this point, every bit helps, I think. And that recommendation for maybe starting out with a flat fee for EVs and transitioning that later. I did want to clarify one comment you made in terms of the amount we pay in federal tax versus what we get back. As I mentioned previously, the Federal Highway Trust Fund has been getting infusions of general fund revenue. So I believe at this point, every state is actually at over 100%. We're getting back more than we pay in the federal gas tax, which is great, may not be sustainable.
Is that from the bipartisan infrastructure bill part?
And prior bills as well. So yes, it needs to be solved at the federal level as well, but there's a reason, it hasn't been yet. So states continue to develop, whether it's studies or full implementation, rather than wait until that gets solved at that level.
And I understand the indexing may not be the full solution, but it is a hedge against the inflation. So hopefully your dollars aren't losing as much as fast. Hopefully maybe even you gain a little bit. So other than ink on a page in a recommendation, has anything happened? Is there any appetite? Has anybody done anything? Has the bill been introduced? Anybody thought about introducing the bill? In other words, does anything happen other than you put a recommendation and spend some ink?
Sandra Rosenberg, Deputy Director. We have participated in another number of meetings with various different stakeholders to discuss that and have begun drafting some potential bill language. Again, we have to, being an executive agency, we have to run everything through the governor's office, but we would be happy to share, again, any additional analysis or if anyone on this committee would like to discuss potential bills, we'd be happy to discuss that with you as well in terms of any work that's been done to date. We didn't stop at this study from 2 years ago. We have continued to analyze and evaluate both the legislative language as well as the potential calculations on revenue.
Well, obviously, I'm interested in seeing something happen from the recommendation, so feel free to reach out if you'd like. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Vice Chair Watts.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I agree with Senator Daly's comments. I do have a question, and I'll give you some leeway in how to respond to it, but do want to kind of shine a little bit more light on the issue that we're facing here. So you presented kind of some of those charts showing the projected shortfall. You mentioned that even comes to our needs to maintain the system as it is without making significant upgrades. So the question is, can you provide any additional background on kind of what the consequences are if we don't do something to address this in the near future?
Thank you, Assemblyman Watts. Sondra Rosenberg, NDOT Deputy Director, for the record. Yes, something we are discussing internally as costs continue to inflate and knowing that we have assets that must be maintained. Many other states have gone to preservation first kind of perspective, which is something we are discussing. So we don't want to let our owned assets deteriorate because that actually adds to the backlog. It's more expensive to fix a road than keep it in a state of good repair. So it's really, the implication is really those capacity projects. And as I said, we're one of the fastest growing states. Population is growing double the national average. VMT is growing faster than that. So to be able to continue to be an economically competitive state, and to be able to build for those potential developments that we're hearing about probably weekly, we would need an additional revenue source. So basically, any of those major capacity projects, new interchanges, things like that, I don't want to say at this point are canceled, but they certainly are at risk if we don't figure out a revenue solution fairly quickly.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And while I'm not as familiar about some of the things that are on deck in Northern Nevada, I know here we've got obviously the interchange kind of in Henderson at the 95 and the 215. I know my colleague here has been talking about the needed improvements on the state road that's Blue Diamond. And so, we certainly have a lot of needs, and it sounds like if we don't figure out how to get the resources in, we are not going to be financially able to address those needs in our communities and in some of the areas where we've seen substantial growth. So I appreciate that. Members, is there any other questions for the Department of Transportation? All right. Seeing none, thank you so much for your presentation. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
With that, we're going to move on to the next presenter for this topic. We're going to be joined by representatives of the RTC of Washoe County. I believe we have Christian Schoenlau and Paul Nelson. Gentlemen, welcome. Take your time to get situated and get everything set up. And whenever you're ready, just introduce yourselves for the record. You can begin.
Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Paul Nelson. I'm the Government Affairs Officer at RTC Washoe, and I'm joined here with Christian Schoenlau. He is our Director of Finance. One of the things that he will be talking about in his presentation is the success that we've had with our fuel revenue indexing, and that's allowed us to do a lot of things. It's allowed us to get more projects out the door. It's allowed us to keep our good roads in good condition with our pavement preservation program, and it's allowed us to make a lot of safety enhancements on many of our roadways. There's also an economic driver behind this too. So last year, because of having this revenue and getting these projects out the door, we created more than 2,600 direct jobs. And then there's a long-term factor too. Because of having a good road network, we're able to keep our transit system operating at a high level. We're also allowing people to commute to and from work and school and grocery stores and doctor's appointment and wherever else you need to go. And it also allows the movement of goods. So there's a lot of positives behind this program, and we do support other agencies that are also looking into or hoping to continue their fuel revenue indexing. So with that, I'll hand it over to Christian.
Good morning, Chair Harris and members of the committee. Christian Schoenlau, for the record, Director of Finance and CFO for RTC Washoe County. You're going to see a lot of familiar themes back in my presentation that have been presented by NCSL and also the Department of Transportation. I want to focus specifically on Washoe County's fuel tax indexing program and what that's done for us. And I don't see my slides up on the screen, and it is a slide-intensive presentation, so I'm hoping that you can see it. So fuel tax indexing in Washoe County, as mentioned, is a way to keep up with construction costs as they are rising over time. So as a refresher, I know we've been down here before, but our fuel tax indexing is based on an average of the prior 10 years of inflation. It doesn't jump up based on the year before. So what that does is allows a smoothing of inflationary impacts. So it's not a perfect system, but it is quite good at over the long term of keeping up with construction costs. As mentioned by the department, we've seen some inflation up to almost 20% over the last couple of years in construction costs. We are indexed on the Western states PPI, not CPI, so it's the cost of producing roadways in the Western region. And again, we look at a 10-year average. That is capped, but we've never met that cap due to the rolling average, just to answer a question from earlier. Our indexing, as mentioned, does not go back to the state, but we do go off of every base rate that's available, so state, federal, and local. RTC is not the only beneficiary of indexing in Washoe County. Our 3 local jurisdictions also get a portion of that indexing revenue back to theirs to maintain their roads and build infrastructure of their own. So we're all sharing in the benefits. It's been quite successful, as Paul mentioned earlier. We started this program in 2009 in its current scheme. We've collected over $1.23 billion in total from our fuel tax revenue. An overwhelming majority of that at this point is coming from indexing at 58%, representing a little over $700 million. And base rate collections in the county are still over $500 million. So we do collect quite a bit of revenue from this to keep our roads going and to make improvements in the local economy. What you've seen with the revenue is it's grown quite a bit since inception, but I hope this chart shows that we're starting to see a flattening of that. Washoe County has experienced significant growth in population, therefore we sold more gallons of gas to match that. And then so as the indexing rate goes up, population grows, our collections go up. But there's some other factors, as mentioned before, that are kind of slowing that over time, and we're starting to see it flattening in the revenue collected year over year. We put this money to work in quite a few good places, as Paul alluded to. We do build some capacity as needed as our community grows. We have a very robust pavement preservation program, which helps us maintain good roads, keep them in good condition so that we don't have to repair them at a higher cost later on. We look to improve our multimodal infrastructure to give mode options for people to get around our community. We've been successful locally and at a state level in collecting or applying for and receiving federal grants. This revenue goes to match those funds so that we can be as strongly positioned to apply for those. We also use our funding to partner with NDOT and other agencies to help them deliver their projects. And then RTC does have debt that we must service, so a portion of our revenue indexing goes towards that as well. For a rather small area, we've been able to deliver some notable projects with our fuel tax revenue. We're wrapping up and substantially complete on our Audie Wells improvements. That corridor was capacity improvements, multimodal, and generally just kind of a facelift for the community. It's a great project. We have a Lemon Drive project that's going to address some concerns in the North Valleys, upcoming in the next couple of years of $40 million. The Secretary of Transportation was recently out to visit us for the groundbreaking of our Arlington Bridges project. We are currently undertaking the Mill Street Capacity and Safety Program. That will add some pedestrian safety improvements, capacity, and upgrades to our Mill Street corridor near the airport. Several years ago, we completed the Southeast Connector project, which connected South Reno to Sparks. That was a $250 million project in total. And then we've recently partnered with NDOT. I will say they took the lead in the majority of the funding in both of these projects, but we were able to support them with some local revenues on the SBX project, Spaghetti Bowl Express, and then also the current project underway, which is the Pyramid Highway expansion. NCSL as well as NDOT pointed to fuel efficiency as being an underlying concern with fuel tax revenue. What I've done is I've taken a simple math to this, is total gallons sold versus VMT, and looked at average MPG over time. So it's not a true measure, but as you can see, over the last 15 years, no surprise that vehicle fuel efficiency is increasing. So inversely, what that translates to is people are buying less fuel. So likewise, simple calculation here, taking total gallons sold by total population, you can see that per person, everyone is buying less fuel over time. And as fuel efficiency increases, we expect that trend to continue as well. Something that was a little unsuspecting in the data was that people are driving more in our area. It could be due to several factors. I'm unsure what's the driving force behind there. With some exception during COVID and pandemic shutdown, people tended not to move. But in our area, especially, you're seeing that people are buying less fuel. They're driving further. And so that revenue just does not balance out for the usage of the roadway. With that, I tried not to repeat anything that was said earlier in the presentation, so I'm happy to address any questions that the committee may have. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. I believe we have a question from Senator Daley.
Thank you, Manager. Similar questions from before. So did I hear you correctly that Washoe County does index the state portion as well of the tax, of the gas tax?
Senator Daley, thank you. Christian Schoenlau for the record. That is correct. We index all fuel tax that's collected in the state of Nevada, so it's federal, state, and county taxes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification, because I wasn't sure on that or needed my memory refreshed, whatever. I know you partner with DOT, as we mentioned. Are you also, and I think you said you're partnering with the local governments, Washoe County, Sparks, Reno, some areas of the unincorporated county that have, the Lemon Valley type areas. And are there limits on, you can only go so far? I mean, you can't be doing residential streets. I don't think that was on the deal unless you're partnering directly with them and there's a nexus to what you guys are doing. But do you partner with those other agencies, and to what extent?
Thank you again, Christian Schoenlau for the record. Directly answer your question, yes, we partner with all those agencies. There are limitations to how we can do that. That's a complex question. It's really defined in our street and highway policy as part of the Regional Transportation Commission. We are the MPO, so we have limits and boundaries. Also, statutorily, there's guardrails on how we can spend that money. So, no, we are not going in and paving residential streets, but we do partner with the local agencies for arterials, connectors, and other streets that may be within those boundaries.
And that's what I understood, the limitations on some of that stuff, but I know it's used as liberally within the constraints of the rule as possible. At least that's what I've seen. I just wanted to make sure that I still understood that correctly, because I know in the past some of those local governments have wanted to say, well, just give us the money, we can do a better job. And I said, no. I said, Go get your own tax question, ballot question, and get it passed. But nevertheless, that was all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional questions from members? Okay, I can't see my folks online, so if you have a question, go ahead and pipe up. All right, I think that will do it then. Thank you so much for being here. We will continue on with our presentations under agenda item number 5 and invite up Mr. Paul Enos from the Nevada Trucking Association.
Good morning, Chair Harris, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Paul Enos. I am the CEO of the Nevada Trucking Association, and happy to be here today. Are you able to see the slides?
We cannot, and we also can't see your lovely face.
I think you may have lucked out today.
Yeah, I'm only going to complain about one of those things. All right, we can see your presentation now, Mr. Enos. Please proceed.
All right, hey, fantastic. Senator Harris, thank you once again. Paul Enos, CEO of the Nevada Trucking Association, and it's kind of been fun to sit back here today and listen to this. And, you know, I'm going to touch on some of the things that have been mentioned in the presentations, but also just kind of delve in a little to the why. I am actually a member of the Eastern Transportation Coalition. I guess they wanted a Westerner who was a skeptic to be on it. I was appointed to that last November, and they're really looking at a mileage-based user fee throughout the I-95 corridor and looking at some of the options. But today I kind of want to talk about the current fuel tax system and why it works. But before I get into that, I do want to say why it doesn't work. It doesn't work because on a national level and on a statewide level, we have not raised it for over 30 years. And while indexing doesn't exactly fall into the great principles of taxation where it's just always raising, I will say from a practical standpoint, that is something the Nevada Trucking Association has supported. We supported the Clark County index. We like that one a little better than the Washoe County index because we're able to get some fairness and equity issues addressed based on where that fuel is used. And really for the trucking industry, we pay a usage fee no matter where we fuel up. So for trucks, if we buy our fuel in California but are using it in Nevada, we are going to end up paying Nevada based on that mileage that we drove. So there is kind of a system set up for the trucking industry through the International Fuel Tax Agreement known as IFTA, and also for registration, IRP, International Registration Plan. But let's get into the fuel tax. So why we like it. So we like the fuel tax because it's really efficient. And while when we go to the pump, we are paying taxes, we're really reimbursing that entity that paid the taxes. So when you look at the number of entities that actually pay the fuel tax, both in Nevada and nationwide, it's less than 300. So because of that efficiency, we're able to really return a lot more of those dollars back to the public. And it's the biggest companies in the world that are paying it. Our fuel distributors, they're paying it when they go to the tank farms and pick it up at the terminal rack. There's 3,000 locations nationwide, only 7 in Nevada. And you know, here's where they are. They're on Sloan, Nugget Avenue in Reno, Sloan in Vegas, Ireland Drive, Grand Valley Parkway. There they all are. So those are the 7 places in the Silver State where they are collecting fuel taxes. When you look at gas stations nationwide, 140,000. We've got a little over that number now. I think about 1,200 in the Silver State. So when you're looking at those 300 entities or less that we're collecting fuel from, it's really an efficient tax. When you talk about how many vehicles we have. You know, if you want to go from the tank farm, the distributors, to the gas stations, to the vehicles, nationwide, we're looking at 276 million and about 2.5 million cars and trucks in Nevada. So when we talk about the fuel tax and its efficiency, that's one of the reasons why, because you're going from less than 300 to 2.5 million. It costs about 3 cents to collect the fuel tax. And really what it costs the government to collect it is less than a penny. We get 97 cents back, and that 97 cents goes to pay for roads, high patrol, DMV, all of those places where we as citizens want our fuel tax money spent. Fuel suppliers, those 300 entities, out of those 3 pennies, they keep 2 of them. And that's their collection allowance. It's, you know, an evaporation tax because, you know, fuel is a liquid, it does evaporate. So they keep 2 cents. So that's where we get that 3 cents. We base our tax rates in Nevada roughly on energy density. So diesel is all the way at the left-hand side. Diesel has the highest energy density of all the fuels. So when you look at our special fuels chapter, and even when you look at gasoline, which is in a different chapter, it all kind of mirrors this energy density. So in Nevada, liquefied diesel, liquefied natural gas, biodiesel is at 27 cents, gasoline's at 24 cents, compressed natural gas, 21 cents, and then it kind of waterfalls from there. LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, 6.4 cents a gallon, based on the energy density. That got me to thinking, okay, can we do a diesel gallon equivalent for a kilowatt hour? And when you do that calculation, and this was my back of the napkin calculation that has been confirmed by people much more credentialed than I am. So it comes out just on an energy level to 40.3 kilowatt hours equal 1 gallon of diesel. And just for context, the average home in the United States of America uses about 29.3 kilowatt hours a day to operate. So that's just how energy dense that gallon of diesel is. When you look at electric vehicles in Nevada, you know, about 4.5% of our vehicles registered here are electric. But as that number goes up, we agree with all the previous testimony. We do think that can break the piggy bank. There's been a lot of discussion on VMT. And, you know, we like taxes that are simple. We like taxes that are fair and equitable, that are unintrusive, and that they're cost efficient. So, you know, when we talk about fair, we want to make sure that you can't cheat. With the system we have now, with those 300 big entities paying the tax when they are at the terminal rack, cheating is pretty abnormal. It's a really, really small level. If it does occur, it is prosecuted, oftentimes with millions of dollars in fees. And when we talk about the zero emission vehicle registration fees, they are simple, but it does bring up the question of equity. You know, is it fair for someone who might drive 15,000 miles in that electric vehicle to pay the same amount as somebody who drives 5,000 vehicles? So that's where that fairness and equity issue comes in. Unintrusive. You know, we want to make sure, you know, when we look at VMT from a telematic sense, which is what a lot of states are looking at now with those GPS tracking systems, that data must not be used for any secondary purposes. You know, it's to be used to pay for roadways, not track individuals, or try to control human behavior. And, you know, why do I bring that up? Because when we first started talking about vehicle miles travel taxes, it was a mechanism for congestion pricing. So imagine you're on your way to work, you're caught in traffic, all of a sudden, hey, we're going to be able to potentially, with congestion pricing, increase that rate that you're paying because you're causing traffic. Now, I would like to make the other argument. Maybe you should pay more for a road that is actually working well and moving fast as opposed to sitting in traffic. So there are some of those concerns and considerations with the intrusiveness and then cost efficient. We want to make sure that those administrative costs are relatively minimal, and if we can get them to be on par with where we're at with the fuel tax, great. But I really do think anything more than that 97 cents is going to contribute to inflation and really isn't the best spend of taxpayers' dollars. Now, my friends at the American Transportation Research Institute have done some amazing studies on this, and I'm getting a lot of that data from there that I put in this presentation. I'm happy to share those studies with you. They're long, although they do have some fairly decent executive summaries. But when you look at VMT and we talk about fairness, your folks who don't have credit card systems or banks, your people who have old cars that can't have that telematics set in, or your people who live in areas where there's no cell signals. Fairness comes up there. You know, of course, we talked about evasion. The potential for evasion with a VMT nationwide is much greater than what we have with the current fuel tax. And ATRI, American Transportation Research Institute, estimates that being $7.87 billion a year, and this study is a few years old, so I believe that number would probably go up. And we did talk about the difference between rural versus urban. You know, how is that going to impact? It was interesting to hear they thought that maybe the rural folks would pay less, the urban folks would pay more. You know, those are also considerations that we're going to have to take into account when we're talking about a VMT. Unintrusive, hey, is that data being used to track you? You know, how are we going to ensure that it is being used for those purposes? And then cost efficient. And, you know, this is where, you know, we do have, you know, a couple of issues. So when you look at the costs for a VMT versus the fuel tax with 300 fuel suppliers versus 272 million vehicles on a national level, you're looking at 3 cents versus 40. And that's a pretty substantial number. That's something that we, as one of the highest payers of the highway system here in Nevada, the trucking industry pays about 40% of all of the state, federal, and local taxes that go to pay for our roads are responsible for about 9% of the road miles. You know, we like to make sure that those dollars that we're spending, those pennies, are going to our roadways and to those things that we all want to see that money spent on. So with VMT, with evasion, with collection costs, you're looking at about 40 cents. You know, where does that money go? Well, on a nationwide level, about $13.6 billion goes into technology. And, you know, you're going to pay your folks who have the servers or pay the folks who have the tech or licensing fees. I know we talk about technology always bringing the price of things down. I sure haven't seen that with my iPhone in the last few years. I mean, I think my first one was $500, and I think my last one I spent was over $1,600. So technology doesn't always decrease. And then things like bank fees. $4.3 billion in transaction costs is what they anticipate the cost for a nationwide VMT. Now, once again, that is a VMT with the technology in the car that is more equitable and is more fair, but isn't as simple as an odometer reading, where you also have some of those compliance issues and some of those questions if you are getting the right data. So that's a VMT. So I've been working on this for a long, long time, and you know, I've always thought, okay, can we take the best that we have from the fuel tax and apply it to some of the fuels that we're using? And we talked about that a little today. And I do think this is a better way, but I will say it's not without challenges, and we will talk about some of that. So EV registration fee. It's simple with the low administrative costs, but it's not equitable. So the next question is, can we tax electricity like fuel? And how would we do that? What would that mechanism look like? You see the states that are already doing this, and Pennsylvania, they were one of the first out of the gate, and they have had some issues where they have pulled back on that. I do think there is going to be a question about home charging, which we'll talk about in a second. But when you take a look at what it would look like if we just did an energy charge, just the same energy equivalent, diesel gallon equivalent for a kilowatt hour, you are looking at a rate of 0.7 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, there's a consideration that I think we want to talk about. Internal combustion engines are less efficient than electric vehicles because 45% of that energy is used for mechanical to get those wheels to turn. For electric vehicles and hydrogen vehicles, the motor is directly on the wheel. So it's a much more efficient use of energy, for mobility. So we could, as a consideration when we're looking at a kilowatt hour charge, look at a usable diesel gallon equivalent and look at it really from a more, I think it's a closer, more accurate share to its diesel counterpart. So, once again, here's my math. I don't know if you want me to go into that, but we do take a look at that usable diesel gallon equivalent, divide it by 45, by 0.45, and we come up with about 18.1 kilowatt hours for a usable diesel gallon equivalent. So that would then make that tax rate 0.0149 cents per kilowatt hour. That would be the equivalent to a 1 gallon diesel tax if you do use that usable diesel gallon tax equivalency. Once again, here's my math, and if you don't have it, I'm happy to share it with you. But I have had it confirmed with folks more credentialed than me. So that is an option to come to that tax rate. Now the question is collection, and from commercial charging stations, for the stations that my truckers are going to be using, you're not going to plug a big rig in your house. You're going to need a supercharger. You're going to need a commercial charging station. You're going to need it at a terminal level. So that's how we would pay for it. And a kilowatt hour tax here is a lot easier. And as previous testifiers have mentioned, it does capture those out-of-state tourists that are coming here and charging, where they would be paying a portion of the fee for the roads they use. It is tremendously more complicated when you look at a home charger, but it's not impossible. And this is where I kind of want to look towards the future, and I'm sad the folks from NV Energy aren't here today because I think they would be great at this. And we've had some conversations with them about it, and how you could collect this data from smart meters. Although they tell me that the smart meters we have in Nevada are actually dumb. But I do know in other states like Texas, where I've seen the bills from the utility, they tell you how much every single appliance in your house is using, how much your air conditioner is using, how much your pool pump is using. And that's because with those smart meters, every single device that's plugged in has an electronic fingerprint. And from that electronic fingerprint, they can tell what's being plugged in, what the charge is, how much kilowatt hours it's using, and garner a tax from that. While it does address the equity issues from a flat registration fee, it is challenging today, and it's not really available on a widespread basis on the near term. But how could we get there? Today, our fuel suppliers are keeping 2 pennies for every dollar they pay. And I do think we need to have a conversation with our utilities where we can say, what is this going to cost you? What is it going to cost you to implement this technology? It may be a collection allowance that is higher on the front end that we can then step down to get to a point to make sure that that algorithm makes the dumb meters smarter, that they can collect that data and remit it. And when you look at the number of entities that would actually be paying that tax on a nationwide basis, we wouldn't be looking at the millions. We'd go from 300 to just under 3,000. And we have 10 utilities in Nevada that we would be dealing with that would pay that fee directly to the DMV to go to the highway fund. These are, of course, ongoing discussions. There's a lot of changes on a federal level. Right now, with the gas tax being a third rail that nobody in Congress wants to touch, there is a conversation about getting rid of all of the highway taxes on a federal level, including fuel taxes, and going to a federal registration fee. Now, there's issues with that too. That's something that I know folks in Nevada kind of get upset about when they go and they're really not paying a registration fee. They're paying a governmental services tax, which is in lieu of personal property tax. But they see it as, oh, I'm paying for my registration. And that's a big nut for folks. On that one-time event when they go to register a vehicle. I think that is a challenge with a federal registration fee. But those are some of the things that we are looking at. We, as the Nevada Trucking Association, our board believes that whatever tax we implement from here on out should be indexed to that producer price index. We like what we've done in Clark County. We think that there's a fair system that was created by this legislature back in 2013. And happy to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me today to be part of this conversation.
All right, thank you so much. Are there committee members who have any questions for Mr. Enos?
I dodged a bullet, or maybe you guys did.
We almost did, because I'm staring at you now.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Good to see you.
You too.
I just wanted to.
Go ahead.
Sorry, did you call on me, Chair?
Go ahead, please. If you'd like to speak, go ahead.
I just want to thank you for that great presentation. I think it's bordering on genius, but I am loving it, seriously, and I think it's something we really need to look at. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Have a good day, Mr. Enos. We'll go ahead and close out agenda item number 5 and open agenda item number 6, which is a presentation on Department of Motor Vehicles and third-party registration services partnership. We have with us representatives of AADMV Services presenting here in Las Vegas. And I believe we have Mr. Troy Arias. Hopefully I said that correctly. All right, welcome. Go ahead and begin whenever you're ready, okay?
Troy Arias, owner of Arias LLC, DBA, AADMV Services. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee for this opportunity to present the DMV and third-party registration services industry situation. The registration services industry has over 140 small businesses in the Reno, Carson, and Las Vegas areas. This group of mostly minority women-owned businesses that has almost doubled in size since 2019. We are currently licensed as document preparers by the Nevada Secretary of State, which requires a $100 document preparation license fee, a background check that requires fingerprints, a $50,000 bond, a state business license from Nevada Secretary of State, and a local jurisdictional license, meaning city, county license. We process DMV transactions on behalf of customers. Think of it as DoorDash, but for DMV instead of food. Who we service. We help Nevada working families with their DMV transactions. We help Nevadans with language barriers. Single parents who can't take the day off to go to the DMV. Nevadans who are concerned with their immigration status and government buildings. Business-to-business transactions and military personnel. The current challenges for Nevadans. As everyday Nevadans, there are several challenges that are faced when trying to process DMV transactions, such as trying to book appointments while trying to meet deadlines for expiration dates or trying to fit appointments into work schedules. For some Nevadans, there are many transactions that require multiple trips to complete. Though online services are being offered, the time it takes from processing a registration or plate online to the time it takes to have the physical paperwork or plate in hand is another obstacle to overcome. These are only a few reasons that Nevadans choose to get help from a third-party registration service. DMV challenges. While the DMV only has 6 employees in their call center answering DMV questions for the entire state, the industry has over 170 people per day answering DMV questions. Not including the in-person customer service, we provide for free for Nevadans coming into our offices, asking about their transactions at no cost to the state. The industry provides millions of dollars in value to the state for very little cost. The DMV has maintained a minimal number of locations, all while our state's population keeps growing. The state's population in 2001 was of 1.375 million compared to this year at 2.953 million. In Clark County, despite the population growth, there are still only 4 branches. Sorry. There are still only 4 branches for non-commercial services. The DMV started construction on a new building in the Silverado Ranch area that will combine the commercial-focused Donovan office and the Henderson office at a cost of $96.6 million. However, this will come at the expense of the Donovan branch closing and the Henderson branch seeing a reduction in staff size, leaving Nevadans in the Henderson area, which is one of the fastest growing areas in the valley, with limited options to process their transactions. Over the last 10 years, DMV has asked legislators for hundreds of millions of dollars to solve their processing and wait time issues. In 2018, DMV canceled a $75 million contract with a foreign company, Tech Mahindra, and lost $26 million. In 2021, DMV was awarded another $125 million to upgrade their system over the next 4 years. This project is still underway, and DMV is exploring options to complete the project as promised to legislator. The DMV's relationship with third-party registration services industry. Each DMV office in the Clark County had 2 windows to serve third-party registration services and help them process transactions. In the north, the Carson City office and Reno office each had 1 window to service the industry. In 2017, the DMV cut the industry's access and eliminated all service windows for the industry in the north and cut the windows in the south from 2 windows per office to 1. The industry attempted to create a community partnership with DMV in 2019 by drafting AB 288 to license authorized third-party DMV services. This bill was modeled after the current partnership program in place in Arizona since 1993. This attempt was met with fierce opposition from DMV and a $4.5 million fiscal note that essentially killed the bill. This was a surprise to the industry as DMV currently had and still has a partnership contract with AAA of California to process DMV transactions in some of their offices. This contract state it cost $0 to the state. The industry was able to salvage the bill through a compromise made possible by the great efforts of Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno, the committee chair, and Assemblywoman Ellen Spiegel, the bill sponsor. The compromise reestablished 1 window per office in the north and 2 windows per office in the south for the industry to process transactions. The industry has been in constant struggle with DMV since October of last year. The DMV tried to completely change how they work with the industry with only 2 weeks' notice. These changes were going to completely destroy the majority of industry members. We appreciate the help from the Land Chamber of Commerce that provided us with an opportunity to be heard by both the governor's office and DMV leadership. We appreciate the governor's office working with the Land Chamber to attempt to solve issues between government and private sector. Due to these efforts, we were able to push back that change and several other deadlines on new procedures that the DMV proposed over the last 10 months. The current registration services situation. The issue in question is one of supply and demand. The demand for the industry services is extremely high. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the third-party registration services were a critical tool for Nevadans trying to get their DMV transactions done after a 3-month shutdown. The industry more than doubled in size during this time. According to Director Laney, there are now over 140 businesses in the South alone. The department has reached its capacity with the current resources allocated for processing industry transactions. Yet the number of new industry members continues to rise. This led to a reworking of the current DMV policy to try to accommodate new members of the industry. The DMV cut access for longstanding businesses and redistributed it to newer businesses. This was to help address safety concerns of industry members sleeping in DMV parking lots, waiting for a turn to process transactions. This policy change also came with a promise of ending industry ability to process any transaction at a DMV window that could be done online, starting on July 1st, 2025. This would effectively destroy the industry and shut down these Nevada family-run businesses. Community partnership proposal. The industry would like to work on becoming a licensed community partner in the same way that driving schools, auto dealerships, and even AAA of California are currently being offered. DMV is creating a public-private partnership with driving schools to allow Nevadans to take their drive exams at these schools. Auto dealerships are now currently processing their own tolls in partnership with DMV to reduce title backlog in Carson City. Since 2017, AAA of California has been in partnership with DMV, processing transactions in-house at some of their offices. The emission testing program is a great example of how a public-private partnership can be beneficial for all parties. There are only 25 to 30 state employees that are directly involved with the emissions program, but they are responsible for overseeing over 400 emission stations statewide. There are over 2 million vehicles that are tested each year, bringing in over $12 million in revenue to the state. Many states, including California and Arizona, license third-party registration services and allow them to process transactions in-house. This creates a voluntary alternative solution for people to process their DMV transactions. It has been an extremely successful program and has saved the state of Arizona hundreds of millions of dollars. They haven't had the need to build a new building in 30 years in the Phoenix metro area. We believe with a path to process transactions in-house, in the future, the industry can play a major part in helping solve DMV issues for Nevadans. The benefits. Establishing an official partnership with the third-party registration services industry will benefit our great state in the following ways. Multiple processing outlets. Nevadans will have other viable processing locations that are not restricted by appointments and have the opportunity of being serviced at their earliest convenience. Businesses operate on their own hours of operation, allowing customers to have service after DMV working hours. In-person service. Many constituents prefer having in-person service due to transaction questions or discrepancies and the ability to have a 100% completed transaction with plates in their hand that day. A net positive revenue generator through a $6 per transaction charge to pay for compliant enforcement, licensing, equipment, and training. Savings of tax dollars in moving all services online and the construction of new buildings. The preservation of countless of jobs and businesses and a workforce that has been in existence for the last 2 decades. For the DMV staff, a tremendous reduction in workload. The cost. We estimate this partnership cost to be low to non-existent since the DMV has already created and is currently implementing a partnership with AAA of California. Creating credentials for additional partnerships should have a minimal cost, if any. The industry will pay for the training, the industry will pay for the equipment, the industry will pay for the licensing, and the industry will pay for the enforcement. We currently estimate that the industry processes over 200,000 transactions a year. At $6 each, that's $1.2 million of revenue that could be generated. This is a great opportunity for the state to partner with Nevada family-run businesses and offer alternative solutions to Nevadans processing transactions at DMV. We now have a bipartisan effort led by Senator Flores and Assemblywoman Gallant to form a working group with DMV and work on the details of this proposal in the near future. Committee members, we have a great opportunity to pass legislation to resolve the issues our state faces when dealing with DMV services, to help Nevadans process their DMV transactions in a timely and efficient manner, preserving Nevada family-run businesses and jobs. On behalf of the industry and myself, thank you for the time and attention.
All right, thank you. Thank you for coming and speaking with the committee today. We appreciate your presentation. Do committee members have any questions at this time? And I can't see my folks in Carson, so if anyone in Carson has a question, go ahead and just pipe up. All right, not seeing any questions at this time. I'll thank you again for your presentation and close out agenda item number 6.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. And here we are at our bittersweet last bit of public comment. Public comment's going to again be limited to 2 minutes per speaker. You can provide it here in Las Vegas or in Carson City, or at the telephone number posted on our agenda. Anyone here in Las Vegas for public comment?
My name is Nick Christensen, NickChristenson. For the record, speaking on behalf of the Sierra Club. I just wanted to thank this committee and the legislature more broadly for implementing and listening to the SOR process, for submitting potential ideas for legislation from the public. One of the things that I think that Nevada should be most proud of is the openness of its elected officials and its legislative process. And in my opinion, this just adds to that. I hope that the legislature has found this to be valuable. In my perusing of the SORs that were submitted for this committee and several others, I found them to be broadly meritorious, and hope that this process will continue into the future. So thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you. Not seeing anyone else here in Las Vegas. Do we have anyone in Carson City who'd like to give public comment?
Nobody here.
Okay, thank you, Senator Daly. BPS, can we check the phone lines, please?
If you'd like to participate in public comment, please press *9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. Caller, you may begin.
Hi, good morning. Could you all hear me okay?
We can. Please proceed.
Good morning, Chair, beautiful Dallas Harris, and the Vice Chair and members of the committee. This is Dora Martinez. I represent the Nevada Council of the Blind and the Nevada Disability Peer Action Coalition. I would highly encourage you all to please support the school zone and other traffic light cameras. I am an avid walker, and for those of you that don't know me, I'm totally blind, and I have a new German Shepherd service dog. And sometimes we follow the audible pedestrian signal lights that tells us it's for our turn to cross the crosswalk. and sometimes people cut us off either making a left-hand turn or right-hand turn. So I hope that in some major road on McCarran here in Reno and others, we'll have capability for camera for those bad actors. Because if I get hit, I'm sorry to say I cannot be an eyewitness. So I highly encourage that part of the legislation. The other one is the DMV. The person that was just got done talking. And Chair Harris, I apologize. I'm sort of short informed on these agenda materials due to lack of accessibility in the LCB website. And I understand that your ADA coordinators are working on that. I'm working with them to make sure I get adequate and sufficient information. But the DMV website is not accessible to people who are visually impaired. I can't even fill out the application for my driver's license. And don't worry, it's not a license to drive. It's a Nevada ID. So I can travel via airplane, trains, and stuff. I was not able to do that online, so I had to go in person, which is not compatible with the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. Also, he talked about language, Spanish and everything else, including ASL. People who are hard of hearing, deaf, need American Sign Language. American Sign Language is a language on its own. They cannot read English, and that's a misconception, and I hope that the MB will soon have that capability. And I'm looking forward to working with the person here at North, because even though they have an ADA line, Madam Chair, as a blind person, I cannot locate that ADA line. So it would be really helpful if there's a tactile features on the ground, like other places that I've been to, that will lead me to the desk to check in. These are just some suggestions, and I appreciate all your time and your patience, Madam Chair. Sorry I'm going a little bit over time, but thank you very much. Have a good.
All right, thank you so much. Please, if you haven't already, submit those recommendations and issues that you've identified to the committee under public comment for the record so that we can have those. I hope the folks at the DMV and any folks at LCB who this might be relevant to were listening. And we'll see if we can make things a bit more compliant for you. All right. BPS, any other callers?
Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no more callers at this time.
Okay, before we adjourn, I just want to take a quick moment to acknowledge all of the hard work and effort that's gone into this interim. Thank you to all of our committee members. I sincerely appreciate your attendance, participation, and dedication during each of our meetings to ensure that the topics that we've discussed have had our full attention and interest related to transportation, energy, and infrastructure issues here in Nevada. A sincere thank you to our committee staff, committee council, broadcast and production services, and our legislative police who are here to support our work and ensure that each of our meetings are conducted seamlessly. Finally, I want to thank all participants and presenters who've addressed the committee and provided us with important information on these critical issues facing our state. This concludes our meeting for today and the work for our committee for this legislative interim. However, we know that our work as legislators continues, and that work is to identify issues and bring policy recommendations to the forefront as we prepare for the next legislative session. Thank you, everybody. With that, we are adjourned.
Thanks, Chair Harris. It was fun.